Hello everyone, Double Bit here. In today's video we're going to go through how I like to break down pallets and use reclaimed material. It was brought up to me recently in a comment and I've been kind of thinking about maybe producing some content in this area, so thank you very much for your suggestion. In this little segment we're going to go over just kind of my process on what I utilize from the pallet to the material that then can be used for the projects that I like to make. We're going to go over a few things here, some price points, and what you need and what you don't need necessarily. I like to run it pretty simple, so we're going to look over here. I utilize a circular saw. You don't have to. This one I got at a yard sale for about $5. You can get them from anywhere from $5 up to $50 or however much you want to spend, or what deal you are able to find. This one is a good Craftsman. It's an older one, but it works perfectly fine for me. One of the methods that a lot of people utilize is a little pry bar and a hammer. I utilize a hammer, but the pry bar, I actually like to opt out for this one. It's a DeWalt. I got this one on sale for $20. They go for around $35, but you can get them at Lowe's, Home Depot, Murdoch's is one of the stores here in town, but Big R, a lot of them utilize the same DeWalt branding, and you can get them relatively cheap or online. Even Amazon sells this one, I think, for around $35 or $34.99. But this is my chosen method. You can actually break down the entire pallet with just this tool using the length of it. This is a 36-inch edition, and you can get them at varying up to about that. It gives you the best fulcrum and the best leverage having this much length on it. So that's my suggestion, versus this little guy will do the trick, but you have to put a lot more force into it to utilize this little bar to do what you need to do. So we're going to run through real quick what I do a lot, and I've done hundreds of times. So on these pallets, you can run through, you'll have 3 stringers, and then you'll have your outside material, or your face, and then on the back side is going to be your bottom. So what I'll do is I usually take my circular saw, and I run a line on either side, and just nip it off. Now this does a couple things for me. If I get my cut straight enough, I don't lose much material over an inch. I get away from my nail holes, and I get away from my cracks. These are going to save me a lot of time and pain. A lot of people want to utilize every inch of the material, but even this end piece here a lot of times isn't a perfect cut, so even if you did get it perfect, you're still going to have to make another cut on it. Otherwise you're going to have to deal with multiple nail holes and you're going to have to deal with a lot. So I just usually nip that and I deal with what I get in the middle. And I have built multiple things that do not require you to have the full length of board. It's just preference of that. Anyway, once the sides are cut off, I'm left with just a center stringer and 3 nails to 2 nails per post, and I only have 1 point that I have to pry up on, and I can process a lot of pallets very quickly, and I save a lot of material and time, because even if I don't on this one have an issue of anything splitting, the next one might, and the next one, and maybe the next 2. So I kind of just have a surefire guarantee of how much material I have by the end. So we're going to run through and process a few going that way. Like I said, you can process off of that, and I might show that as well, just how long it takes and what it is that you can still get away with. But ultimately I feel just the one pry bar will do the trick and save you lots and lots of time of pain and suffering and agony of trying to get it apart, and ultimately kind of choosing to just save what you can. So stay tuned, let's take a look and see what it looks like through the time lapse. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. Once your 2 sides are cut and you flip it back and forth on there, the material comes out pretty nice. I got every board except for the center stringer, which that stringer I had already looked at had a crack down the center of it, and you can see it kind of just busted apart on me. But that aside, if I was just going after the kind of skirting or outside of it, I was able to get every single board. I nipped off 1 crack on one end, and everything is pretty much good to go. The only other step in the process that I do is these nails that are left over are pretty well straight. You can actually save these nails, and they're relatively straight to be used again. And this certain pallet that I used here actually has really nice ones. They have some mild barbs and whatnot. Anyway, I'll set this up on some sawhorses. You can use 2 rocks even if you want to. I've used that before. Or even balance this off of your deck or porch and just hammer on this until it comes out a little bit, and then just use a normal hammer of any kind that can pry those out. Or you can even hammer on it with the end of the pry bar. If you're going on the cheap and you just go with one tool, I'd go with this. And then you can pull out the nails, and then you're pretty much good to go with your material at that point. And whatever you're working with, I was going to say a circular saw is kind of one of the more basic tools, or what you'll probably have, because you can make a lot of things with just a circular saw that you wouldn't require a table saw, a chop saw, or anything like that. You can get away with just a circular saw. So it's one of the more basic tools I look at. I use it in its vast amounts of versatilities for a lot of things, and it seems to be one of those items that's on a very nice budget. You're not going to look at $180 up to around $500 for a table saw. You'll usually probably have a circular saw, or you can get one, like I said, at a yard sale to get you by, to get a few projects under your belt and either make money or just advance your own skills and use of power tools to then feel like it's worth purchasing a table saw or a chop saw or whatever your next decision is. But like I said, I'd still probably get a pry bar regardless if you're going to be processing any kind of pallets. This is invaluable. Multitudes of times I've used this, not just in processing pallets. So that's the first method. We'll go over the second method, which is pretty much just primarily pulling the entire pallet apart, just utilizing this tool, no circular saw. So stay tuned, that's the next bit. Alright, so you can see that method's a bit more rough. As much as it might have looked in the time-lapse and or video segments like I was being rough with it, I was actually being very gentle. It's just a lot of leverage with that pry bar, so it's able to kind of break things apart, but it's still prying. It's just, there's a little too much going on with the dynamics of those 3 points that it ends up breaking apart a lot of the pallet rather than you saving it. The other issues you're going to run into is I was leaving a lot of nails, because the nails are actually pulling through because they're doing their job and staying true to where they're hammered in at, but the top parts are actually busting through. So you're not really saving a lot. You can see a lot of the pieces are just kind of falling apart, and like I said, there's a lot of nails I have to go through, and a few of these actually don't even have the heads on them because the head pulled off, but the nail didn't actually come out. So I'm not really saving myself any time. Now the other method, if I was to try to save these, the outsides, I'd probably more than likely still have to go through the same process. There is a wood chunk though that I can then use the pry bar on to get it out with, so sometimes that helps. So it's kind of a plus and minus there, because I also do have a chance still to pull the head off and then have to go through with pliers and whatnot, but that's just some of the downfalls as far as the stringers are concerned. As far as the material, as you can see, I was using the same kick method to bust off or just loosen up the centers, and this is the bottom piece. But you can see here, it was breaking through the nails if you did stay in, or it was just straight creating holes and a lot of tear out. So I'm not really saving any material. If I ran through with my circular saw, I'd have saved this end and the trouble and hassle of going through and having all these issues that I had. The center is still pulled out perfectly fine. That's going to be your easiest point to get out without any issues or concerns. So this method works. As you can see, it was still very much a struggle, and I wasted a lot of the material, so I'd have to harvest a lot more pallets, and I'd have a lot more throwaway material in the end. Now granted, some of these pallets, these ones in particular that I use, are from Mexico, and it goes through a process called pressure treating, where they put it in a pressure cooker essentially and pull all the moisture out of it, and it's a usable board. Since it goes through Mexico, I know it's not chemically treated, and a lot of times they use a green paint or a pink paint to signify if it has been chemically treated. It's a lot more expensive. They're not going to go through that from Mexico to get it up here. They're going to go a cheaper method, which is the pressure cooker, and it costs just next to no money to actually do that. So from this method, you can see how much of a struggle it is. So what I'm going to probably end up doing is, even though I said I was going to do 3 methods, I'm probably just going to leave it here, because as you can tell, it's going to get even harder utilizing just a hammer with a little claw end on it, or the little pry bar as you saw it. Now, like I said, that method does work. it'll take you probably about 15-20 minutes per pallet using that method, because you're going to have to work this end, you're going to have to work this end, and then you start in the center. Otherwise, I was going for the center. It is the easier setup and the easier one to pry up. You end up causing a little bit more pressure on either end, pulling the middle first. So there's a couple of them. I did try to go just to the straight end, but as you can see here, it immediately did a stress crack. And it just ruined it, and it went right to a knot. Of course, that's where your knots are going to usually end up going, is right to the knot is where that crack is going to follow. But regardless, I can still utilize this in my projects. I would still have to figure out either a handsaw or something to cut right here and right off of those nail points, and then I can just probably pound these out no problem. And I still have a salvageable board that, you know, is a couple feet to 3 feet long, and that's usable, and that's what a lot of people do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's multiple parts of this shed that have little segments, because this was one of the methods I chose to do when it was all I had. Before I had power to the shed, and I didn't want to run an extension cord, but I had energy, so I felt like tearing down pallets and wasted a lot of material that could have saved me having to get more pallets from work and spend more time trying to process them in hopes of getting that part. At that point, it's a question of how much gas you're spending, if you can make a purchase, or if there is even a readily available a circular saw, or if you wanted to go through, you could go through with a handsaw and handsaw all of these off. Might seem like a little bit more energy is exerted, but ultimately you get more product out of it. So that's another valid way to do it. But I'd still suggest the one way that I did that actually streamlined and got this done really fast is just nipping both sides of the pallet, running through the center, and like I said, the pile comparison, this is usable material, and a few of the bottom boards are good, but the rest of them, well, that's not a huge amount of usable material there, and you're going to get a lot of kindling pieces. Now granted, this has knots in it too, which was ultimately one of the downfalls of why that one blew apart in half. But so that is the methods that I use and the ones that I'd suggest utilizing. There's a few more out there, a few more people utilize things. There's tools you can purchase too to ultimately take the pallet apart, but it's dependent on budget, what you're comfortable with. Some people don't like a long pry bar, feel like they're going to hit themselves in the face, so they want to use a little pry bar. They feel like there's more control over it. You have to put a lot more force and exertion into what you're doing, and ultimately tiring yourself out, so it kind of limits the time you have for the day. But these are all factors and all things that run through my head when I'm processing material and whatnot. So my suggestions ultimately would be safety glasses first and foremost. You will always, regardless of how careful you are, you will always get a sliver somewhere around your face. It happens all the time. Yeah, I don't know how many times there's little nicks and stuff. That's the reason I usually leave my face a little scruffy. Makes it a lot easier to not see all the nicks. Anyway, side note. So safety glasses first and foremost. You could use the hammer and little pry bar method if you want to, if it's all your budget allows you. But I'd say the pry bar for sure. 20, 35 bucks just for that tool alone. You can get away with it just by itself, and a circular saw. So thank you very much. Hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully it's helped you in some decisions, and hopefully it helps you to ultimately get those ideas down and to the material, and you have good material to work with using these methods instead of feeling like you just turned a perfectly good pallet into a bunch of toothpicks that are just now worth being kindling for a fireplace, or thrown into a landfill, which is what we're ultimately trying to get away from here. We're reusing and upcycling material for cost, as well as we're using it so that way we use up material instead of just going down to Home Depot and Lowe's and buying all that perfectly good lumber and going through that whole process. Let's utilize what we've got and, you know, make that creative wheel start spinning in our brains a bit and actually pump out some good, worthwhile content or worthwhile projects, and ultimately heirlooms for our friends and family. That's what I love to do. That's the whole reason I started this workshop and everything else, is because I enjoy what I do and I enjoy what I produce. So thank you very much. This has been Double Bits, ways of taking apart reclaimed material and making it reclaimed material for further use and future use. So thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe. Helps me out greatly. If you enjoy this and want to get notifications, make sure to hit that notification bell and hit the all selection, or whichever you select therein. It also ultimately helps me out greatly. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next video. Have a good night. You start in the center, Otherwise, I was going for the center. It is the easier setup and the easier one to pry up, but you end up actually causing a little bit more pressure forward. Since it came from Mexico, I know it is not chemical treated.